SaferWatch and law enforcement. SaferWatch is a powerful tool that enhances public safety by improving communication between law enforcement and the community it serves. Through the SaferWatch platform, agencies can send real-time emergency and non-emergency alerts, keeping residents and visitors informed about critical incidents, safety advisories, and community updates. Additionally, SaferWatch allows the public to report crime tips, suspicious activities, and threats, providing law enforcement with valuable intelligence. SaferWatch tips have led to the prevention of school shootings, stopped sexual predators, caught wanted fugitives and burglary suspects, and has even prevented suicides. This easy-to-use two-way communication tool ensures faster response times and helps protect the community proactively. By empowering both citizens and law enforcement, SaferWatch fosters a safer, more connected community. For more information, visit SaferWatchApp.com or download the free SaferWatch app on iOS or Android. Welcome to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm John Creamer, Deputy Executive Director of FDSA. Each episode, I sit down with law enforcement thought leaders to tackle critical issues shaping the future of public safety. Together, we'll explore key topics that empower law enforcement professionals to navigate challenges, lead with confidence, and advance their careers. Take a pause, gain valuable insights, and lead your career with purpose. Thanks for listening. Today on our show is Captain Joshua Bitsko. Josh is retired from the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. We had a long and prosperous career there, and now Josh is a consultant for law enforcement. He's a consultant on leadership and training and tactics, and we're delighted to have you on the show today, Josh.
Oh, thanks for having me. I have been lucky enough to be able to travel around the country and now teach about resilience and, through some of the experiences that I've had. So any chance I get to share my story and maybe help some officers along the way.
Yeah. And for our listeners and for you, Josh, a lot of our podcasts, probably every other podcast has something to do with mental health, resiliency, strength, finishing strong, retiring well. And when you and I first connected, 6 months ago? Maybe it was last year. Yeah. We started talking last year. I went to your webpage, and Josh, for our listeners, what's your webpage?
It's www.bitskoconsulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn under my name, Josh Bitsko, too.
Okay. So I looked at your webpage, which is beautiful. I read some of your background information, and then you and I spoke. And I found your story compelling just on the phone when we spoke. And then you came to Florida. We had you come over and you did a presentation for us hosted by the Clay County Sheriff's Office last month. And we had a large turnout. And I was very proud that you made the journey out here. And I'd like you to share with our audience, some of your story. What led you to retire and go down this pathway? And why resiliency?
Well, it is a short path from Las Vegas, a short flight from Las Vegas to Florida. But no, it was great and everybody was great. It was a wonderful venue where it was held. And like I said, I was happy to be able to reach so many cops because that's ultimately the goal, is to have an impact on law enforcement and kind of give back after my career. I did 24 years with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I was a patrol officer. I was a detective sergeant for some time. A lot of my time was spent in K-9. As a K-9 handler and a K-9 sergeant, where I ran our training program, did some time in our child abuse and neglect section, internal affairs, and ultimately promoted to a captain, where I was a captain over the Las Vegas Strip, had a couple different jobs as a captain, and ultimately I was a captain over the Wellness Bureau. And that's kind of what got me into, the resilience piece of law enforcement and how it really is a missing piece in law enforcement. And for me, I had a lot of different critical incidents and personal trauma as well in a very short period of time. And, you asked the question, why am I doing this? It's simple. I went through a lot and I didn't take care of myself at all during that time. And it really impacted me physically and mentally. And I don't want cops to make the same mistake I did. So if in retirement, I'm able to share my story, teach, which I enjoy teaching police officers, even though, as you know, John, cops could be some of the worst students in the world. I can say that because I was one and I was a terrible student. Yeah. But to be able to connect with a class and, with the ultimate goal of maybe changing how we approach our mental health in law enforcement, that's ultimately the goal. And my mission now in retirement is I was lucky enough to hire on young and still retire with enough energy to go around and do this. And, find like-minded folks like yourself, John, where, you also care about the mental health of cops and be able to have that impact.
Well, thank you for saying that, Josh. So a couple of things. So in Florida, again, for you and mainly for our listeners, Florida leads the way in a lot of the things that happen in law enforcement because there's so many people that live here and so many things happen in Florida because, we're known for the Florida man, things like that. So we, cops are resilient everywhere, but in Florida, I think we're kind of ahead of the curve, if not, in the leading edge. But one of the places we still lag behind is in resiliency. So that has only been something that's really popped up at a statewide level, I'd say in the last maybe 18 months, 2 years. And one of our first guests on the podcast was the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Deputy Commissioner Matt Walsh. And Matt led the charge at the state level to create something called the Post-Critical Incident Seminar. And that's a 3 or 4 day seminar where first responders get away and they get immersed in wellness and resiliency, and they maybe get exposed to EMDR for the first time and some other counseling and group talks. So it's really, really important to us. And again, so I thank you for saying that. I thank you for your mission to get out and train folks and help people finish strong. So, but the fact that you guys had a wellness unit or division, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, well, when I was a captain on the Strip. A new sheriff got elected, Sheriff Kevin Mayhill. And when the new sheriff comes in, he kind of shakes things up and reassigns captains places. And, I had a day where all my friends that were captains were calling me, oh, I'm going here. Oh, I'm going here. I'm moving. And I liked the job on the Strip. It was a 24-hour day job. So I was busy, but I enjoyed it. And everybody pretty much had gotten called but me. And I was like, well, am I getting fired? Am I getting demoted? You never know, because when you have a sheriff and the new regime takes over, you never know where you're going to stand as a captain, because I had no say over where I went. Well, he calls me and I'm like, it's about time. And he's like, hey, I want you to start a wellness bureau for the department, which, honestly, you could have knocked me over at that point, because I was the more tactical, I was canine and all that. I was never in peer support. And I'm like, why are you asking me to do that? Why me is what I asked him. And he's like, well, you've been through so much and you handled it well. And, my thought is, you don't know how I handled it, because the truth is I didn't. It worked. I was the guy. I was testing and promotion and always going to specialized units and everything. But, I was a mess, because in a very short period of time, I was involved in the 1 October mass shooting here in Vegas. I was involved in an officer-involved shooting, lost a father to cancer, lost a brother to suicide, and went through a divorce in a very short period of time. And again, I didn't process or handle any of the things that I had been through. I had started therapy at that point because I saw, I was seeing the effects of all of that. But, that's why I'm so hyper-focused on resilience over wellness. And wellness and policing today, everybody talks about wellness. And, the problem is you say wellness in front of a room full of cops, oftentimes you're going to get met with eye rolls, because it means everything. It means nothing. It could be a company trying to sell an app or some programming for wellness. It could be some, hotshot doctor that wants to retrain how we handle critical incidents. Or the thing is, it means so much that it can mean nothing. Whereas resilience is more focused on building the strength to experience trauma and still perform both physically and mentally after. And that, I think, is the ultimate goal of policing, and where I see policing shifting in the following years is building that strength. It's, we don't treat mental health like we treat physical health. Right. Meaning, I'm not driving to a fight call, pulling over and cranking out some push-ups or pull-ups to get stronger for that fight call. But that's how we treat mental health. I wait till I have a problem and then I try and fix the problem. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And, we can get into that. You heard a lot of it in the class that I gave. But truly focusing on, from the second you pin that badge on your chest, building that resilience and strength. And there's ways to do that. You can become a more resilient person to be able to process through 30 years, 35 years, even 25 years of, the difficult things we see on a daily basis as cops, and the things that we experience, and not have it impact you to where we no longer survive in retirement. Back in the day when I was a new cop, there was that anecdotal, well, cops live on average 7.5 years less than a normal person. I don't know where that came from, but I did read a study that they did a study on law enforcement officers in municipalities, in a municipality, and they did city workers and law enforcement officers. They're breathing the same air, they're drinking the same water, working for the same government. And the law enforcement officers died on average 10 years younger than the retired just city workers. And if that's not a wake-up call that we need to do something different, then I don't know what is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this too. So it is a wake-up call. And then for me, I turn 55 next week, and which is hard to believe because I still feel like I'm
happy early birthday.
Yeah, thanks. I still feel in my 30s in my mind until I look in the mirror. But where I'm going with this is a lot of the folks that I started with who just retired or have been retired just for a short time are starting to have significant health issues. I can tell you just in the last 6 months, somebody that I worked with for years had cancer, an advanced form of cancer, and was dead in 6 months. I just learned today that a couple other people that I work with for years intimately also have developed cancer. And a lot of that goes along with, there's that book called The Body Keeps the Score, because our body keeps. I
love that book.
Yeah, right. And our body does, outwardly, we may not show it, but inwardly, it's taken its toll on us. And to your point earlier, if I walked into roll call with a bloody wound, what would happen? The sergeant or somebody would call 911 and they would fix it. But if I walk in and my head's cloudy, what's this problem? You get isolated.
That's an awkward conversation to have.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I'm a firm believer that if we as an industry are waiting for the next program or app or executive staff to come in and fix all of our wellness and resilience and mental health issues, then we're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah.
Because even a well-intended sheriff or chief that wants to change the wellness of their agency, that whole culture has to change. And we have to be willing to, like, there were cops that I could not stand, did not like, that I would take a bullet for on the streets. But then you ask me to, hey, that guy kind of seems off, and go ask him if he's doing okay and how he's sleeping and did a call affect him or how's his family doing? Well, that's an awkward conversation I didn't know how to have. But just as important, we're so apt to back people up tactically and on the streets. But when it comes to mentally, it's like hands off. And, a big thing that I talk about is courage and how to overcome fear, like on active shooters and in the moment, and build people tools for that. But there's a whole nother aspect to courage, and that's having the courage to have that conversation when we know somebody's off, because family and peers are always the first people to know that somebody's struggling.
Josh, say that again. Courage is what?
Courage is the ability to have those conversations, the real conversations, when you can tell that a peer is off, because friends, peers, family are always the first ones to know a law enforcement officer is struggling.
And that is something, and I'm so glad you said that and that you redefined that as well, that you underlined it. In our earlier episode with Doug and Karen Monda from Survive First, that's one of the things they hammered home too, is have the courage to ask your buddy. You would take a bullet for somebody that you may not even like, but you don't have the courage to lean over and go, hey, you don't seem like yourself. Are you good?
Well, yeah. And then it's a skill to have those conversations, because like when I was at my lowest, if somebody said, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. And then they walk away, then it's done. But how do you have the conversation? How do you ask the open-ended questions? Like, hey, I was on a call that really bothered me last week. You were on it too. How are you doing with all of that? Or the other question is, how are you sleeping? Because we know through research that sleep is often the first thing to go when your mental health is struggling. That might open up a whole other conversation. You have to be ready for that too.
Yeah.
Because what's the goal of the conversation? If this person's struggling, I want to be the one to help get them to help, whether that's peer support, a chaplain. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I don't call it check-ins, mental health check-ins. We don't beat around the bush. Cops are too smart for that. But no, go in and seeing a professional, which is hard. It's hard to go in and talk about the things that are bothering you, but the benefits outweigh the hard.
Yeah, absolutely. What I wanted to talk about next is, and I'll come back to what you just said, that to me, there is irony is not the right word, but there's a reason the sheriff put you in that role and asked you to create that unit. And there is a reason. And it's the culmination of all the things you've done in your career. And when you and I talked in the past, I mean, you were an operator. You were boots on the ground. You were in the front of the pack. And I think there was a strong reason he put you on that, because you did handle it well, at least on the outside. And then tell us about 1 October and how that event culminated.
Yeah. So in Las Vegas, and if you're listening to this, there are certain things that are going to be difficult to hear or re-experience if you were at the concert, the Route 91 concert in Las Vegas in 2017. I just kind of always throw that caveat that I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it fairly intimately. So there's some things that are hard to hear, especially if you were involved in it. But there was a armed subject. I don't say his name when I do media. If I'm doing a tactical debrief, I'll go through it because I think that there's value, but I try not to give this guy any more notoriety than he already has. But so there was, we'll just say the suspect. There was a suspect that went up to the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas in 2017 on October 1st and broke out 2 windows and began shooting using bump stocks, which replicate fully automatic fire, down into a crowd across Las Vegas Boulevard at a 3-day country concert with 22,000 people a day. An outdoor country festival. Jason Aldean was on stage and he began shooting into the crowd. Over 1,000 rounds in the course of about 12 minutes. You had 51 overtime officers that were working the event, several sergeants and a lieutenant that was the incident commander, that went from shaking hands and being thanked for being there because it's a country concert and those are generally pretty easy overtime events, to taking automatic gunfire similar to combat. I mean, that switch was immediate, and over 413 people were either shot or hit with frag. 58 people were killed that night. 2 have since died from their injuries, and over 800 people injured. So just the magnitude of the event was, it was impactful on everybody there. It just, you don't have shooting. It's still to this day the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, and not something that, I ever wanted Las Vegas to be known for. We had trained for it because we knew after the shooting in Mumbai years back that we were a target, but you can train for it and then the reality is much different. So the shooting began, it was at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. I was training dogs about 9 or 10 minutes away. And we do different dog training. So we're preparing new dogs for the streets. And I had my radio on scan and I heard automatic gunfire come over the radio. So I looked down because we have 10 work functioning channels with a dispatcher that are operational at any time. And I used to listen to all of them at once in case something happened and I knew I needed to go. And I looked down at my radio and saw that the shooting was coming from the Convention Center Area Command, which is the Las Vegas Strip. So I grabbed my one officer that was in uniform. I'm like, let's go. Told the rest of my team to get dressed because you dress down. You don't train dogs to bite people in uniform for obvious reasons. And Dave and I, the other canine handler, hit the road and go. As I'm driving, I'm hearing this chaos on the radio, trying to get my arms around what's happening. I'm doing a little bit of crisis rehearsal, trying to figure out what is it going to look like when I get there. Initially headed to the concert, expecting screaming people, trying to find a suspect. There's no suspect description. Nobody sees him yet. You have the gunfires echoing from the Mandalay Bay in the concert area. The speakers were still open, so gunfire was coming from the speakers at the concert. So it was very confusing at first, especially through the chaos. Something that I teach about in my class is that chaos and how to overcome that. And so initially, trying to do some crisis rehearsal. Well, as I'm driving, we figure out that it's actually coming from the Mandalay Bay at an elevated position. And so I call the SWAT commander, which was his second week as a SWAT commander. This was his first major call out. And hey, there's an active shooter here. We get everybody rolling. So he did the all call to get everybody rolling. But as we know, and we've seen time and time again, active shooters are generally, it's patrol that is going to have the greatest impact. Our tactical teams are usually coming from either a warrant or home or that. And it's those first several minutes that all the work is done on incidents specific to that.
Right. And let me say this too, Josh. So I had chill bumps when you presented this live, and I have them now because I see the weight of it on your face after all this time. And I'm grateful for what you're sharing with us. I really am. So go ahead.
Well, yeah. Listen, it's never easy to talk about. This was the worst call of my career, the worst night of my life. But there's value in sharing it. And there's also value in sharing it in a vulnerable manner. And I could sit here and just be the tactical guy and talk about all the tactics and what we did. And then we high-fived after and moved on. But, the truth be told is everybody that went up to that room came down different. So we get to the Mandalay Bay. As we're arriving, me and Dave, you have the Shark Reef, which is attached to the Mandalay Bay. It's an aquarium. And then you have about 100,000 square feet of convention space, and then the Mandalay Bay Tower and casino. Because the suspect was shooting right across the street, an officer was just shot in the arm. It was his first day on the street out of the academy, was shot in the arm responding with his field training officer directly in front of the Mandalay Bay. So we knew there wasn't an avenue through the front doors to get in. So we get to the Shark Reef. I called for more officers. So I met with 3 detectives that were out and about, heard the call and showed up ready to do their job, which was impressive. They're wearing polos, an outer vest with pistols, but they were ready to have an impact. And so we put together a team, geared up. I was lucky enough, as well as Dave, to have our full SWAT gear, because our K9 section at the time, we work with the SWAT team on pretty much everything they do. And so we gear up and make our way through the casino floor, through the aquarium, through the convention space to the casino floor. And when I get to the casino floor, there's a security podium with a security officer. And a lot of people don't know, there are armed security, but not every security officer is armed. So I grab one of the security officers and I grab one of my detectives that was on my team. I'm like, go to surveillance and get me intel, because we don't have a lot of intel. The suspect was shooting when we arrived, but had stopped shooting as we're, making our way to the room. And so did he leave? Can we get eyes on the suspect? We don't even still have a description. I remember that detective's partner's like, okay, I'll go with him. And I did a quick count of who I had at this point. Giving up that detective, there was 4, including me. So it was me plus 3. I'm like, no, we're going up to a room to, get this guy. I knew I needed him. So I said, he has to go alone. There's decisions we make as cops, decisions we make as leaders where we know those are impactful decisions. And for me, that was one. I'm like, I remember where I was at in Mandalay Bay floor, where I go, I hope that guy doesn't die. Because I knew I was sending people into danger, but I didn't want to make the wrong call and get somebody killed.
Yeah.
And, that's some of the burden that we take on when we're team leaders. And you don't, I use my words carefully, not rank. Yes, I was a sergeant at the time, but rank doesn't matter. We all have to make those decisions as cops. We wear a badge. So we made our way to the elevators. We had shut down the elevators while we were on our way to try and help contain the suspect on the floor that he was at. And so we met an engineer who had a key, and he keyed the elevator open. I had another team, another detective sergeant with a couple detectives and officers show up. So we came up with a plan. They went up to the 32nd floor to meet the 2 officers that had made it to the floor and give them support. Well, over the radio, they had told us that the security was in a shootout on the 29th floor. Turned out to not be accurate information in the chaos and everything that's happening. You have a security officer report to their dispatch, who calls our dispatch, who tells us. But what the information we had at the time is that security was in a shootout, and I didn't want them behind us. So I said, we'll go deal with that shootout on the 29th floor, and then we'll make our way up to the room. And we get there, and there was no shootout on the 29th floor. So we begin to make our way up to the 32nd floor where the suspect is at. And when I get to that floor, another thing I was worried about was blue on blue, is every officer on this. And we had a lot of officers showing up and arriving, and communication sucks, right? Yeah. On anything like this, because no matter how good your radio system is, when you have, hundreds and hundreds of officers on one radio channel all trying to communicate, it
gets overwhelmed. Yeah. You get the throttle and then aggravation.
Yeah. And so I was trying to get on the radio to say, hey, I'm coming out onto the 32nd floor in this wing. And, I couldn't get on the radio. Finally, I'm like, okay, breach up, open the door. And that's where I run into a SWAT officer who had showed up, Levi Hancock, and we basically clink barrels. Like, we're just going, he's coming in, I'm going out. Well, he got up to the floor because he responded to the all call. He was out and about and close and was able to get there to have an impact. And he's like, hey, I saw the suspect's room. So if you picture the Mandalay Bay, you have a center area with elevators, 3 wings going off of the center area. Each wing were roughly 300 yards with rooms on each side. And at the end of the hallway is double doors. And the double doors is a suite. And that's the room the suspect was in. He had shot through the door at a security officer that interrupted the shooting early on. So he had already shot through the door 100 times or so. I don't know the exact number of rounds he fired through the door. But so Levi's like, let's go down a floor to the 31st floor. Next to his room is a stairwell, fire escape stairwell. So we'll use that to get access to his door. Okay, let's go. So we made our way down the hallway on the 31st floor and went up to the stairwell on the 32nd floor. And the door opening to the hallway, the suspect had planned for a lot of this. Like, this was a planned attack. And he had used a L bracket to screw that door shut because he wanted to funnel us down the hallway. And it's hard to say. There's things that we were lucky or someone was looking out for us on something so tragic and so many people died, at least for me personally, to talk about that. But one thing that the SWAT officer I had with me is a breacher, and he does explosive breaching and taught explosive breaching and grabbed his kit when he came up. So a small L bracket. He had a little pry bar we were able to pop off and open the door. And when we opened the door into the hallway, so to our left is the double doors of the suspect that he had shot through dozens of times. So you have fragments and pieces of door on the ground. Across from us, directly across, so that was room 135 he was in, 32, 135, and directly across from us was room 32, 134. And in front of that door, he had a room service cart that he had placed. And coming from the room service cart, there were wires going underneath the door. Now, what we're hearing on the radio, because you had 22,000 people at a concert, as I mentioned, 413 people shot or hit with frag, over 800 injuries, all of them running into surrounding businesses screaming active shooter.
Chaos.
When that happens.
Just chaos.
Yeah,
right?
chaos. But what do all those surrounding businesses do? Call active shooter at their property.
Right.
Because it's the confusion and the chaos. So we're hearing on the radio, active shooter at New York, New York, active shooter at Caesars, active shooter at the airport, which butted up to the concert grounds. So all of this in our heads, it sounded like, because I had never prepared for those are called ghost calls. I never prepared for those calls. So I thought, and we all did, Las Vegas was under attack. Like we hadn't figured out what those were yet. So that coupled with a cart with wires going under the door, we made the natural leap that was an explosive device. But now in our heads, what can we do? I can run down and grab my bomb dog out of my car. That would take 30 minutes at least to get all the way through Mandalay Bay, double time back all the way down to the car and everything that I had to do to get there. I'd call for a bomb squad, take even longer, and whether they could even operate in a hallway and do x-rays when a door had been shot through like that. So it really left us with an option, and our option was, we can hope that this doesn't blow up. And if it does, then it creates a path for the next team. I mean, we just didn't see any other options at that point. So we step out into the hallway. My K9 handler, I had a ballistic shield at the time. Only K9 and SWAT had ballistic shields. And he shields the door that the suspect had shot through while Levi hangs a breech on the door. I cover the secondary door, and on top of the cart is a camera taped to a plate, which that's what turned out to be the wires. Is he had put cameras on the cart so we could see the hallway and see our approach.
Gotcha.
Because he wanted to funnel us down that hallway. So I reached down and I flipped the camera over so it's not facing us. And I'll tell you, I was kind of turned my head because I was still thinking that this was going to explode when we did it. When I did that, it didn't. Get the breech hung, step back into the alcove at the top of the fire escape stairwell. And we call down to the command post and let them know what we have and what we're going to do. So we breach the door, do the explosive breach. And initially, you have the fire alarm going off at that point. It's just adding to that chaos. Levi and I lean out into the hallway, look into the room. We didn't just breach and go at this point. And now, mind you, I have a SWAT officer, 2 K9 officers, some detectives, a couple patrol guys. That's the team. And they were all gamers. They were ready to go because they showed up. The ultimate filter is the people that made it up to that room to have an impact, right? But I'd love to have a full SWAT team. I'd love to have my whole K9 team all in gear and all that, and a dog, which I can get to in a little bit, why we didn't have a dog. But I didn't, but I knew we had the team we had. Look into the room and I see a 308 rifle on a bipod with a scope next to the door. One thing that we learned afterwards is the suspect was trying to port next to the door. He had a big hole bit drill and he was trying to create a port so he could shoot down the hallway at us and have a clear field of view, which I never finished that port. And then I had the dumbest thought I had all night is when I saw that gun inside, I remember thinking, oh, we got the right room, which when you've served a lot of search warrants, you realize you always want to make sure you're, breaching the right door. But it wasn't the bullets through the door, or the cart with the wires, or the L bracket that keyed me on me at the right room. It was when I saw the gun inside. So we step out into the hallway, joined by another team with 1 SWAT officer, a couple patrol officers, and we make entry into the room. I cover the secondary door at first as we start to make entry, and then I make entry. We clear out the room. We find the suspect deceased with a self-inflicted gunshot wound on the ground. Clear out, make sure there's nobody else. Now, he had 2 rooms and the adjoining door open, but when he breached both windows to shoot down into the crowd, that door blew shut. So he locked himself in the main room. We did a secondary explosive breach on that second room. The second SWAT officer, not Levi, I always make sure I clarify for him, had a 3-round burst AD when we did that breach. And then we go into that second room and clear that room out. So now we have a crime scene, right? We find the suspect dead. still trying to figure out everything that's happening. We, send pictures down to the command post. I find this checks to the suspect's girlfriend in the room. So we have other names for our investigators to start following up on. And I get my team. I'm like, hey, let's go back down. We have to go down and go to the next one because we're hearing on the radio all these other calls. By the time we get our team down to the ground floor, we realize that, those other calls were what they were. They had started sending teams to them and they were all turning out to be ghost calls, scared people, chaos. So I then go into the command post. I give my body camera to the investigators and I walk in and I'm like, what do you guys need? And like, hey, we need a strike team at every property on the strip. Like, okay. So, we took a black eye in Las Vegas that day and we needed to make sure everybody felt safe. So I sat down and spent the next 12 hours in the command post, just sending teams to different properties on the strip and making sure they had, we could get breaks and had enough people to do that for the following days. But like a couple things and lessons learned is, number one, when we were gearing up, the other canine handler said, hey, do you want to grab your dog? And my police dog, Loki, a patrol dog. So we carried two dogs. I had a bomb dog and a patrol dog. And Loki was my patrol dog. And he was very enthusiastic, would have been great on this. And he looks at me, he's like, well, you want to grab a dog? And I'm like, we're going to kill this guy, not going to bite him. Because of training scars and stress. Because the second we breached that door, I remember thinking, shit, I wish I had my dog. Because I love you, buddy, go. And I'm right behind you. He would have been a great tool to have. But prior to that, active shooter training for us was, you don't want to take a dog because running a dog through a crowd of screaming people, it's not going to be effective.
Right.
And because of the stress, because of the magnitude and how I had trained before, not training specifically for stress, but training for specific scenarios, I didn't see this for what it was. So that was a huge mistake. And lucky that we didn't need that tool because the suspect had taken his own life. But, it could have been bad to not have it. And one of the things that I teach about and train is how to train specifically for critical thinking under stress, because I would have remembered to have that tool if I was able to clear that fog of war a little bit more.
Yeah. And we'll be right back. Every day you put your life on the line to protect and serve. Who's protecting you? United Badges Insurance Services operates as a dedicated resource for the first responder public safety community. Serving thousands of first responders, United Badges offers a wide range of products including commercial insurance, group accident and health insurance, and personal insurance such as auto, home, renters, rental properties, vacation properties, boat, motorcycle, RVs, flood, and umbrella. United Badges serves active and retired public safety personnel, public safety agencies, public safety associations, public safety support businesses, and public safety families and friends. Experience the United Badges difference. Call 800-566-5990 or visit unitedbadges.com to request your free insurance quote today. United Badges Insurance Services is a proud strategic partner of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. Applicants are individually underwritten by each respective insurance carrier and subject to insurance policy terms and conditions. Not available in all states. Promotional material for descriptive purposes only. Now back to the show. Again, I still have chill bumps, Josh, because you just don't know too many people who have walked in your shoes with that incident. And your courage is unquestioned, and so is your team. And your dedication to the city, the citizens, and the folks that were visiting, it's just unquestioned. And all the stress. I mean, Murphy's Law, right? It's always he's always going to get you. So you guys are doing K9 training. You hear the call. I mean, that shows you that you were what we used to call, hey, that guy's 10-8. You were squared away. You're already monitoring other traffic, in spite of being a supervisor and training K9 handlers. You guys respond. It had to be pandemonium. In my mind, it had to be the ultimate pandemonium. All the flights up the stairs, how many times did you have to combat breathe and tell yourself to slow down and reassure your team, slow down, slow down?
Well, several times. And at one point, when we're making our way to the room, I tell my team, I'm like, hey guys, you're doing effing phenomenal. Beers are on me later.
Yeah.
That was intentional because I could just feel their energy.
Yeah.
Because I knew if I was stressed and having been, a senior officer, been in K9 for a long time, that I knew they were too. And, you make statements like that too. This is all going to be okay. We're doing great. because I know what we're walking into. And I would love to say that I was like calm, cool, collected the whole time. Externally, I was. My body camera's all online. You can watch it. But internally, my heart was racing. I mean, my heart rate got to 161 when we breached the door because I had my smartwatch on that was tracking it. And so, having been through all of that, I was trying to calm myself and tactically breathe. And that's a big part of what I teach now is how to do that, because there's some tools that I use that night, like crisis rehearsal and controlling my breathing. But there's some tools I wish I had. And working with professionals and researchers on critical incidents and police psychologists, I've been able to come up with some real clear directed tools for people on how to combat breathe, how to box breathe or phrenic breathing, or these things that can in turn then reduce your heart rate and reduce that fog of war. So then you can make clear decisions in the moment.
Yeah, that coupled with the ghost calls, the adrenaline dump, the highs and lows, who's going where, who's coming to help you, what you uncovered when you got on the floor, the AD probably would have been like the final straw on my back. You know what I mean? With your stress level being that high. I mean, there's so many things that are happening at one time. So many things happening at one time. So, and
I would love to sit here and say that like, I was just angry that this was happening in my city and I'm going to, use that anger as a motivator. But really it was more like, there's nobody else. We can't wait. If we wait, people down below are going to continue to die because we can't get the full force of medical to people and get people out of there until we clear out this room. But so really it was like, this is happening and this is us. There's nobody else and we got to do it. But I would be lying if I didn't say there wasn't fear there.
Sure.
Sometimes,
I mean, we're not really geared to say this anymore, but sometimes you just got to cowboy up. Sometimes you got to do it. And you thought it through and that, I'm risking the odds, but this has to be done. And the thought that you were thinking that if something cataclysmic happened and you and your team were killed, you were clearing away for the next team. That shows the mindset of most law enforcement officers in America.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest gaps that we have in training our cops is we know what needs to be done. We have the training tactically, but how do we do it? How do we get that mindset right to understand that we're going to be asked to do scary things? We're going to be asked to confront that fear and even talk about it. Maybe not in the moment, but, internally acknowledge that this is normal to feel fear and you can't get rid of it. You can just navigate through it. Through training, through breath work, mitigate the physiological effects, learn how to regulate your emotions in the moment to do what has to be done, and then take care of yourself afterwards, because we're just asked to do things normal humans aren't asked to do at times, right?
Yeah. Let me ask you a personal question. So this incident happens, it's protracted, all the highs and lows that you went through, your whole team and everybody that responded, all the first responders, and then you worked hours after that. How long after this event did you start seeing signs that part of your mental foundation or wellness or resiliency were starting to crack a little bit?
Oh, immediately. My big thing was to just shove down those hard emotions. And the scary thing about shoving down hard emotions is it works until it doesn't. So, every point up until my career, every dead kid or fatal car accident or drowning or whatever that I've been on, I just was able to compartmentalize and not think about it. Yeah, this event was different. I tried to do that same thing and it didn't happen. That resulted in me turning into a zombie and being numb and, not wanting to confront the bad, which also led for me not experiencing the good. And, I think that's the case for a lot of cops, a lot of first responders, and honestly, just a lot of humans and a lot of men and people that have been through hard things in their personal life and professional life is we just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And I shut down for years. And then on top of that, you stack my personal losses that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, and then being involved in an officer-involved shooting with the SWAT team 6 weeks after this, where we're serving a search warrant for a murder suspect, and he pulls a gun on me while my dog's biting him, and the same SWAT guy that was with me on 1 October ends up shooting and killing him and another SWAT officer. And all while I'm wrestling with this guy and my dog and the gun and all of that stuff that was happening at once. But again, I hadn't even begun to process the other event, nor did I want to. And it took years for me to realize that, I need to sit down and talk to a professional. But that's why I'm so big on resilience and building that strength before you need it, rather than, it takes you 10 years to walk into the forest. You're not going to walk out in 2 sessions with a therapist.
That's right.
So But yeah, I was just really numb and didn't want to feel anything and because I didn't want to cry and I didn't want to be vulnerable. So I just kind of shut down and I was irritable and I was not open to people. And so, yeah, and it got progressively worse over time rather than get better. That whole time heals all wounds just isn't true.
Yeah. You got my wheels turning, and I'm sure our listeners are thinking this way too, Josh. So how long after this event did you have to go back on duty? Like regular?
Oh, I worked the next 3 weeks, 12-hour shifts.
Okay.
And I never went and saw a professional. I never went immediately to talk to people. We had an officer that was down in the field off duty with his wife at the concert that was getting people out, and he was shot and killed. We had the officer shot in the arm, and we just there's people that have it worse than I do.
Yeah.
That need the help. And so, yeah, I never took a minute off after this.
And then 6 weeks after this event, after you've worked all these shifts in a row, you just described that officer-involved shooting you're in. Did you get time off after that? I mean,
I did, because it was such close quarters, and he had ended up aiming the gun at my head when I grabbed it, and the other guy shot him. That I had about a week off. I had to go see a psychologist and get cleared for duty, but I went in and lied.
Right.
I went in and I'm like, because this time I wasn't, my home life wasn't what it is now. I didn't have support at home. I didn't have a strong faith. I didn't have anything to help me through, but I went in and told the therapist I did.
Yeah.
And she signed me off to go back to work. So, and I was at work the next day. So it was just, that again, because I didn't take my own mental health seriously.
Well, there's the dichotomy, right? Is that not just you, but all of us, we wrestle with these things, and we're like, hey, I know I need some help. I don't know how to ask for it. And then when somebody finally asks you for it, the biggest lie told in America, probably told in the world, is, hey, how you doing? I'm fine. It's probably the biggest lie ever spoken. So it takes courage to tell the truth, but then we go right back to the very job that's causing us problems and the stress and the angst that comes with that. And we're not looking for an outlet. We're looking to get right back in the fight to keep that level of hypervigilance, at peak performance. And we run out of runway. That's what happened to me. I ran out of runway. The way I was able to cope with things in the past was compartmentalization. And then at some point, all the compartments were full and nothing worked anymore. So is that kind of what happened to you? I mean, when did you transition from the numbness and the anger to, your road to a different path?
Yeah. I think it was, so, a couple of years after that, I mentioned my brother had committed suicide or taken his own life, died by suicide. And that kind of was for me one of the straws that broke the camel's back. I had a good friend. She told me, hey, you are not yourself and you need to sit down and talk to somebody. And even then I was resistant, but it's right there on Front Street. Somebody that cared about me came to me and it's like, you need to sit down and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
She had the courage to have that conversation with me. And so I started, but it's a process. It's not like, you think, okay, I'm finally seeing a therapist. I'm sitting down and talking to him. I'm going to be better. But it took, months and months to finally kind of start to break through. And I'll be honest, I still see a therapist and I'm still working through the things that I've been through. And that shooting we're going on 8 years this year. Right. And, it still impacts me. And I'm still peeling away layers of guilt and, anger, and both in my personal losses and professional. Because here's the other thing about being a cop is we always talk about this stigma, right? When it comes to law enforcement seeking help, and we see these horrible things every day and it takes its toll, and it does. But we're also human, and we also have relationships and kids and bills and stress and all those things. And so when I was in the wellness bureau, I would go visit officers that were put on crisis, that were put on holds. And I'd sit down and talk to them. And not a single one did I sit down and talk to were there specifically because of a traumatic event that they experienced at work. It was all relationship or addiction or something along those lines that drove them there. And now the trauma we experience makes those things harder and makes those things worse. But ultimately, it is usually something like me, like my brother's suicide, or something like that really drives us there, or even an organizational betrayal from the department that you work for. You go through this thing and then you feel like the department doesn't have your back, and that can be, devastating to somebody's mental health.
Sure can.
And so, it's all of these things that, that happen that ultimately drives someone to their breaking point. And it's rarely a call. They have an impact. They make things worse, but it's usually something like that really affects them.
What I found in my work life, that even though it was organized chaos, it was still organized. We live for in Florida, I'm sure it's out there, you get toned out. If it's a priority one call, they're going to tone out and they're going to say your ID number or your zone or whatever. And you would live for the adrenaline. Or if I was working homicide and the phone rang in the middle of the night, I'm like, I'm in. And I had you talked about earlier, like a mental template. If this, then that. Here's the schema I've developed in my brain, how this is going to go. And that organized chaos I fed on. And then when something went wrong in there, and there was an event that could just kind of knock you down for a minute or make you, stutter step, you realize that's just part of the job. At the time, that's how I did. I just went, okay, that's part of it. But you're right. In my personal life, being on the other side of the table when somebody in my family took their own life, or somebody had a tragic event that I was related to, and being on this side of the tape, you're right. That kind of breaks the foundation open, right? Because it's no longer the cop persona. It's now this person that I've ignored, and I'm not wearing a bulletproof vest anymore. But I'm the father standing here in a polo shirt and hearing this for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there is, in fact, a stigma for law enforcement officers getting help, mental health help. But I think sometimes we use that as too big of an obstacle, because I talk about my personal loss. Well, my mom, she was a school teacher for 30 years. She lost her husband and her son in a short period of time. She won't go talk to a therapist because it's hard. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We don't want to relive those things. And so, the stigma isn't just law enforcement, it's humans.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. How long after this, Josh, did you guys start? Did the new sheriff come in and you guys start this wellness division?
This was a big part of why he wanted to do that, but it was about 5 years. It was a new sheriff came in, and he was the one that did it, that created it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned is, we had the resources. Nobody used them or knew about them. It was being the wellness captain. I was just bringing a lot of the resources under one roof and educating people about it. We had them. There were some that we didn't, that we had to get, but it was really just people didn't. They weren't aware of it, nor did they want to use it. And it's, you can have, like I said in the beginning, you can have the best wellness bureau, the best appointed building, all the resources, but if you don't work on that culture, then it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
No one's going to use it.
Yeah. Here's an example too, a real life example from an agency I worked at. They started a chaplain program. One of my good friends was just on the show a few weeks ago talking about chaplains program. So it wasn't him or that organization. It was another one. They started a chaplain program, and they brought on all these just fantastic people that were in the community, that were, ordained or, had been through all the training and things like that. And it was a flop because they didn't roll it out right. The people that came in, the pastors, the chaplains that came in, never learned how to integrate with the officers. There was who are you here? Why are you here for? So there was a stigma, even though the command staff was trying to do something good and beneficial, it wasn't rolled out right. So to your point with these wellness programs, that can be the same thing, right?
Yeah, well, and there's a reason that the class that I teach is the way that I teach it. So I start with doing a debrief of the 1 October shooting. I tell my story, because ultimately the goal is to give people permission to feel what they're going to feel and to know that I've been through it. And now I'm going to talk about these other hard things and the hard part I've been through. But, you have to connect with the class, and cops want to know that the person they're talking to understands them and have been through something similar. And so as I teach my class, it's I tell my story, then I get into the emotions you're going to feel and how to regulate. Then I talk about the officer involved shooting. Then I talk about trauma and resilience. That's all intentional. It's research based because, through storytelling and through that connection, then people tend to listen and can get more from the class because of that.
Yeah.
It's the same way when you're rolling out a wellness bureau. Like I said, if people don't want to, if they don't think that like if I work for an agency and I can't get time off to go train, I can't get time off to even go to a class, but then next week they're bringing in clinicians or chaplains. Hey, talk to these people. We care about your mental well-being. Then why, if you don't care about this part of my career, why do you care about that part? So it's important for staff to really, you have to change that culture and step up leadership on top of having the resources and having the Wellness Bureau and having all of that.
So you're reading my mind. So what advice would you give to a newly elected sheriff or a newly appointed police chief in this realm?
Well, it is, if you want to improve the wellness, mental health, resilience of your agency, you have to connect with every single level of that agency. That means not just the officers. Going to briefings and talking to them and, giving the message is important. But the sergeants have to also believe it. We know now that the sergeants really, they steer the ship. I used to tell people when I was a captain over the Strip and I had over 300 employees working for me, and I was definitely not the most important person in that building when it came to crime fighting, when it came to the wellness of my cops. I could set the tone. I could talk about the right things. I could also take 3 weeks off if I needed to, and everything would be just fine out on the streets. There'd be loaded up admin work when I got back. But it's those sergeants and those the shift lieutenants, the shift commanders that really can drive that messaging. So you can have the policies, you can have the resources, but if the culture isn't there, then you're wasting time, because none of it's going to sit unused. Like that example you gave with the chaplain program. If the culture isn't there for it, then you're wasting your time and your resources.
So it's got to be a complete buy-in from the top down with immersion and showing everybody the value. It's not just the value of, hey, you're a bot and we need you to keep working. It's the value of a whole employee, a whole person whose life is balanced out at work and at home, that produces, equality and wellness, right?
And also knowing that changing that culture takes time.
Right.
Is you can't have an agency that just kind of treated their people like stats to bring crime numbers down and overtime worked and how much each person costs to maintain training and payroll and all of that. Shift to this wellness and expect in a month everyone's going to believe you and buy in. Even if you believe it in yourself, it takes time to change that culture. It's like changing the direction on a cruise ship. Not just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, but changing that direction of the entire ship.
Yeah.
And if you can do that and you can effectively change culture, expect 5 or 10 years.
Exactly.
But we live in a world of instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go buy this newest program from this company that says they're going to sell wellness. They have an app or a program or analytics or whatever it is, and we're going to sell this program. And we're going to do that. That's not going to cut it.
No.
Those things can be great additions to a wellness program, but without the culture, again, no one's going to use it. No one's going to log into the app and find resources or do what they do.
Yeah, that's also can be from a not well-intended administration. That can also be a check the box mentality. Hey, we have an app. I mean, what are you complaining about?
Yeah. Click on the app and find a doctor.
Yeah, you're all right.
Mm-hmm. Rub some dirt on it.
Yeah. So, Josh, in closing, what would some advice that you would give, a hard-charging patrol officer or patrol deputy right now, somebody that's probably walking down a similar career path as you, maybe a detective, a deputy, a sergeant, who's out there operationally and squared away and is looking vigilantly to get into something, who has been through something? What would you tell them?
I would say, regardless of how you feel right now, that you I loved being a cop all the way up until the day I retired. I didn't love the politics of being a captain or certain things like that, but I loved the job. You have to treat your mental health exactly like you treat your physical health, and you need to work on it from day one and build on it, even if you don't feel like you need it now. And because at some point in your life, it will catch up to you. And you can start having nightmares or getting emotional or whatever it is, however this comes out in you, whether it's physical, whether it's mental. It may not seem like it today, but invest in yourself. Your mindset and your resilience is just as important of a tool on your belt as your gun, taser, handcuffs, magazines, vest, all of those things. So you can only ignore it for so long.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, Josh, tell our listeners, if they want to find out more about you, repeat the name of your webpage and where you're at on social.
Yeah, so BitskoConsulting.com. If you Google my name, Joshua Bitsko, it'll come up, among other things like news stories and whatnot. But finding that website, going to BitskoConsulting.com, I have, I try to update where I'm going to be where I'm teaching. But at the same time, you know, I have an online class because, again, investing in yourself and taking this course that I teach in a method that you can do it on your own time. And there's body cameras, high quality video. I don't skimp on any of that because I hate the online classes where someone's just talking into their laptop on a headset and they, you know, sell this online class online for $100 or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. So, you know, invest in yourself, and you can get a little more in depth into, you know, a debrief of the incident. I talk about the incident. I show body camera that I don't even show in my in-person class. And then on top of that, you know, talking about how to mitigate the physiological effects of the emotions, the fear, anxiety, tactical paralysis, which is freezing, which we've all seen cops and leaders freeze in the moment. And then ultimately the resilience piece and how to build that resilience. But there's a lot of tactical takeaways and other things. So the online class is a great way to, you know, get more of what I talked about today. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Josh Bitsko. I'm on Instagram, Joshua Bitsko as well. And then I also wrote a book that's going to be released on October 1st that tells this story and then also gets into it's called The Courage to Live, and how to live again after dealing with trauma and not just go through life being a zombie.
Yeah, amen to that. Will you let us know when your book comes out and we can push it out to our listeners? We can push it out on our internal distribution list and things like that, because people need to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on and let me share my story and, you know, some of my insights onto how to survive this career of law enforcement that we all have signed up for.
Yeah, I'm delighted that you're here, Josh. And again, your presentation was fantastic. Talking to you today made it even more real, because we talked about things that you can't talk about in your presentation because this is intimate. This is a one-on-one. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for your courage. I'm grateful for your career. And I thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Tactical Pause, the official podcast of the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association. FDSA proudly serves over 25,000 deputy sheriffs across the state with legal benefits, vital training, and financial assistance in times of need. You can listen to previous episodes at fldeputysheriffs.org or wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and encourage your friends, coworkers, and those in the law enforcement community to listen as well. To learn more about the Florida Deputy Sheriff's Association and how we serve those who serve, visit our website at fldeputysheriffs.org.